Make your recovery about you. When you do that, you'll find that those things, they come back and they mend themselves. You know, the best apology is not words. It's not "I'm sorry." You know how many times our family's sick of hearing "I'm sorry"? The best apology is your action. They don't want to hear "I'm sorry" anymore. They don't have to. You can make a choice and change your life.
We are joined by Antoinette Baca Gonzales, and I've known Antoinette now for about 2 years.
Yeah.
And in the time that I've gotten to know her, she has proven to be an amazing peer support worker and amazing friend. We have so many patients or clients that are at their lowest point and they don't believe in themselves and they don't think that they're worthy, and Antinet is the person who picks them up, tells them, nope, you have to keep going and you have no choice. I feel like your firmness with people, your direct firmness with people, is really important. Obviously they trust you, and I think that's the big part too.
Yeah.
And they trust your story and the things that you share with them, and that's why they usually do whatever it is that you guide them through.
Right. I think you're right. I think the vulnerability is there with me. Like I said, even in this podcast, there's nothing off limits. I mean, I definitely feel it's important to be transparent. And if that means that certain parts of my life are exposed, then I'm willing to do that for the sake of other people healing.
Yeah. Well, just to jump right in, from the outside looking in, you said that you came from a stable home. However, you felt unstable and unsafe as a child. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah. So what I mean when I had a stable home is, I think, my grandparents raised me. I was put in their care, I think, at the age of 2. My parents were very young when they had me, so about 16, 17. And were unable to care for me at that moment. So, I think this is a good example of what can happen even in a stable home, right? And when I say stable home, I mean that people can have, food in their fridge, they can have a safe place to sleep, and you can still end up with addiction. And that looks like, experiences, right? So I had a stable home life, but when I left that home, with people that I trusted, things happened. And so that's where I say I did have a stable home where I, didn't bounce around from house to house. I had a stable home. We had food in the fridge. I watched my grandparents work every day. So it was very stable, but inside, you're right, I didn't feel okay because of my experiences. Yeah.
The young version of yourself, what pain were you carrying that no one ever asked you about?
I think that's a deep question. When I look back at the person, that young version of myself that you're asking about, I look at the people around me and I can't even be upset that they didn't understand it, right? When things were happening to me, they didn't know how to deal with that. And in return, we just didn't talk about it. I think if it was brought up, we changed the subject, or it was kind of swept under the rug. So that looked like a lot of me being left to my own thoughts. And as a young child with those kind of thoughts and like not understanding it or not having somebody to talk to about it because it kind of gets pushed down, it kind of stays buried until it comes full force when it's ready to come up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is something that ever came before addiction entered into your life, but it sounded like you felt broken before that point.
Oh, yeah.
Or unseen.
Mm-hmm. I was unseen, unheard. I was very broken. I was angry. You know, it turns into, like, not understanding as a child, and then that goes into, like, adolescence, and it looks like rebellion. It looks like anger. Like, I was completely emo. I think anger.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of it was resentment for not being protected, and
Mm-hmm.
just anger is really how I can describe that best.
Mm-hmm. You said that it was a household where you weren't talking about your emotions.
Mm-hmm.
What did that mean to you growing up as a kid, and how did that look in your life, where you couldn't express yourself or emotions did not exist?
That means, you know, as an adult or even a teenager, that you don't know how to regulate your emotions.
Mm-hmm.
That's what that looks like. And it's pretty unfortunate because I think a lot of people go through that. I think it happens in different cultures where you're kind of seen and not heard. And, you know, and I can't even be upset again about that because I think everybody has different cultural beliefs. And I think depending on, you know, when your parents were like my grandparents raised me, you know, and so they only could do the best that they can do with what they were given. And I think back in their time, you know, they didn't talk about things like what were happening. And it wasn't even something like now it's normalized, like on TV, like, you know, back then they didn't know.
Yeah.
They didn't know how to talk about stuff like that. So they just kind of moved on from it and just kind of wanted to, you know, live our life without that. And that looks like somebody now who didn't know how to regulate emotions at all. Yeah.
You told me that in childhood that you were sexually abused. Without giving the details of that, how did that trauma shape how you saw yourself?
It changed everything. I did not want to be seen. I thought it was my fault. I think a lot of people that go through sexual abuse, molestation, and rape, I think anybody who deals with something like that, I think there's a certain level that we blame ourselves. And you blame yourself. And then what's hard with childhood trauma, because you go from really not understanding what happened, right? Because I think that was the point in my life where I was like, wait, I didn't comprehend completely what happened. And then you go into, like, you know, the end of elementary school going into middle school, and you start to know, like, what you know, sex is and, like, all of it. And then I'm like, wait a minute. You start kind of, like, piecing it together by yourself.
When that happened to you, or at any point after that, did you tell anybody about it?
I did. I think in elementary school, yeah. I had said that, and it was pretty frowned upon. You know what I mean? Because it was something that happened, and like I said, nobody wanted to talk about that.
Do you think that in high school, trying to find a relationship or thinking about that in, you know, dating or having a boyfriend, how did it affect that?
I don't think it affected me in high school. I think I got to a point in high school where I kind of, I felt a little safe, right? Because now I'm around people my own age, and there was a comfort level there being around people my own age, because everything that happened to me was with people older than me. And so when you have high school come around, I think I just wanted to fit in. You know, I did do cheerleading, and I forced myself to kind of, like, try to get out of my shell, but really I didn't trust people anyway. I mean, I wore, like, obviously the cheerleading outfits, and I tried my best to fit in, but in reality I was, like, in a really dark place. I do believe in forgiveness, but I do think that we have to be held accountable for our actions. And I tried so hard to just, like, you know, do what my family was saying, like, just kind of forget it and move on, and in return, it came back full force. And I didn't know who I was. I just tried everything I could to fit in at that time.
In high school, was that the first time you experimented with drugs?
Yeah. I mean, I think I was like 16, 17. I mean, at first, I really only had one good friend. And, you know, she was very outgoing, so she had more friends. So we hung out with, like, you know, her friends, and they were my friends too, but really more her friends because she was really the only person I really trusted at that time. Yeah, I mean, it started out with drinking, you know, and just like on the weekends. And I really didn't think anything of it until I realized, like, it was an issue where it felt good to, like, numb the things that I was feeling.
You also said something about how there was a belonging in using. Are you saying that with socializing and then the alcohol, it felt like it was a place that you could belong?
Yeah, and I could be, like, normal. Like, because I was very quiet and, like, and angry, you know? But, like, when I drank, I felt like I was more outgoing and, like, I could, like, no fear. I could talk to people and, you know, just have a good time. And I felt like I couldn't do that otherwise because I had all these walls up, like, you know, for trust and, you know, anger and all of it. And so, like, it kind of, like, I couldn't be myself. I didn't even know who I was, let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And so doing drugs and alcohol, it just kind of, like, allowed me to, I guess, you know, belong.
Was there a point that you felt that shift? So from just being social, then to needing it for coping?
Yeah, for sure. So I think after high school, me and my friend, we drifted apart, and that broke me. And that comes again from not being able to understand, like, how to handle emotions. So her and I had a falling out, and so I was alone, and not really trusting people. I realized I had a deeper issue because I had him at 18. And I knew probably around 21 that I wasn't socially drinking like everyone else or doing cocaine on the weekends like everyone else. And I knew I had a problem. I knew because what was happening was I was feeling like, I guess now what I know is a trigger. I didn't know. So I would just start, if something happened or, like, I started remembering stuff because that came up very frequently. Like, triggers were coming up, but I didn't know what that was. And I would start thinking about it. I'd get depressed, and then I'd, like, drink to forget it, you know. Little did I know that I wasn't forgetting anything. I was just blacking out to numb it at that moment. Yeah.
Were most times that you were drinking, was it alone?
I mean, I had, you know, when I would work places, like, I had some friends that sometimes I would drink with, but I think for the most part, I was alone. You know, like I was as a child, alone. And I think that followed me to an adulthood. A lot of my addiction was, I mean, there were sometimes people, but for the most part, it was in the dark.
Yeah. You told me about alcohol, that there was then a period where it transitioned to harder drugs. What was that progression?
There was a lot of depression going on in my 20s. There was a relationship that I had got into, and I think he had cheated on me, and I'm telling you, like, I fell in love with this person. Even not just him, but, like, his family and, like, the way that they loved each other. I was, like, I don't want to say envious, but, like, I had never really seen something like that. And so, like, I kind of, like, fell in love with not just him, but his family. And, you know, when he cheated on me and, like, left me, and it was, like, heartbreaking, you know. And I was left to deal with emotions, and I didn't know how. And there were people close to me that I would go and, you know, drink with, and they were doing harder drugs. And I got introduced to it at a pretty young age, and I started doing it. Yeah.
You were struggling with anxiety, PTSD, and depression before you even had a diagnosis. How did mental health fuel the drinking and the drug use?
Well, I mean, I didn't know what was happening, like I said before. I think I didn't even know, that I had anything wrong with my mental health, because everything, you have to remember, like childhood trauma, I thought this was normal. I thought, like, normally, like, get over it. Like, I thought, like, I just had to get over things, right? Like, I just had to, like, power through things, and I didn't know that there was a diagnosis. And even when I did find out, I didn't understand what that meant. So this whole time, like, I'm thinking it was just an escape from my reality. And it really messed with my mental health, honestly, because I think I was in such bad depression, and, like, I didn't understand that. And I think now, like, I can see it in other people when they come see me. Like, I'm like, I can see when they're struggling so much that I can understand, like, if it's depression or if it looks like PTSD. Like, I'm not diagnosing them. But coming from somebody who's had chronic depression, mental health issues, I can see it in other people.
Do you remember when you had a diagnosis?
I do. I got arrested for my first DWI. And when I got arrested, they pulled me in. They were doing fingerprints. Mind you, I had been in trouble before for, like, a fake ID, but this was not the same. Okay, so I was actually getting booked into the jail, and they were doing my fingerprints, and I had never been in this kind of situation where they're like, put your hands on the wall, and they started patting me down, and it was very uncomfortable. And I, of course, thought, like, this is normal. Everybody probably thinks this is uncomfortable, but it was pretty excessive when, they were like, hey, we need your underwear, and they were wanting me to switch into their clothes, and I was pretty intoxicated at the time, so I think a part of me I was blacking out, but I ended up on the floor in the fetal position, crying. And I was screaming at them, and I was like, you're not taking my underwear. And I think it threw me in a trigger. Now that I can recognize it was a trigger. And I wouldn't let them. And they didn't even know how to respond to me, because I was fine one second, and the next I wasn't. I was like a little baby in the fetal position on the floor crying. And the next day, I remember they came to see me in the cell, and they were like, hey, we wanted to see if we could, get you with our psychiatrist to evaluate you, because some of the behaviors that you had coming in, they didn't feel were normal. And I was like, I don't, I guess. Like, I didn't really know much. I was like, yeah, whatever you want to do. And they did come in, and I remember she was like, I'm going to ask you questions now. And she was asking about, my childhood and, like, being sexually abused. And, like, I just started crying. And she's looking at me like, I just need you to say yes or no. And tears were flowing. I couldn't answer her. I think she knew the answer, but I couldn't respond. I just choked up, and I couldn't. And then she was like, yeah, and that's when in jail, she was like, I really do think, like, you're suffering with some PTSD. This was the first time I heard it, was when I got arrested.
Yeah. Was there something, like, a follow-up that they had you see somebody else or see that same person?
I mean, so that was the first time, like, I had heard I had some PTSD. I did follow up when I got out, because obviously with an arrest, you do have to do, like, your court order to do stuff. So they had court ordered me some counseling and IOP. They had put me with a male counselor, and I wasn't comfortable, and and I didn't know back then at all that I could advocate for myself for a different counselor, or that I could, that it was kind of crucial that you connect with your counselor. I didn't realize that till later. So he kind of went over some stuff, but I think for the most part, I just was going through the motions. I don't think it was sticking at that moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You said something that I really feel is a deep thing to say, and that is you asked for help, but you feel like you weren't heard. What was that you were asking for?
So this was before my first arrest. I actually knew, like I was telling you earlier, I did know that there was something wrong with me when I was 21 because I wasn't able to function properly. And I was still taking care of my son, but like there were those days where I was just like, what is going on with me? And I remember just having a complete meltdown, and I was like, I can't do this anymore. And I called somebody. They gave me a ride to detox. And so when I was 21, I went to detox, and I went in there, and I told them, I was like, there's something wrong with me. Like, I need help. And I remember her telling me, like, well, do you have the shakes? Do you have DTs? And at that time, I didn't have any of those symptoms. So they let me out of detox probably after 7 days, saying that I didn't have an alcohol problem. That she thought I needed some counseling. So it was the first time that I was going to go to counseling when I was 21. And I decided to go see a counselor. And I remember I was kind of like, oh, I want it to be a Christian counselor. I thought that might be better for me, especially with all the things that I dealt with. And I did do that. I went to see a counselor. And I remember going in there, and now that we work in behavioral health, now I know, like, the intake process is not a counseling session. It's just for us to, like, obtain information. But I didn't know that then. And so when I went to do my intake with this lady, I kind of, like, what they call, like, word vomited all over her, right? Like, I was like, all this stuff is going on. And, like, I tell her everything. And I spilled everything to her. And I remember looking at her, and she looks at me, and she's like, wow, for being so young, you've sure been through a lot. Just like that, with the look on her face, complete judgment. And again, I felt unbelieved, and I was embarrassed. I was like, this is insane. Like, why would anybody do this? And I remember I left there crying, and I thought, you know what? They just told me I didn't have an alcohol problem. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go get alcohol because this does not feel good. Mm-hmm. And if this is what they thought was going to help me, it's not. Mm-hmm. So I did. I went and got alcohol, and I drank. And then it's like a week later, I was thinking, if she really does care, right? Like, and maybe I'm overreacting, she'll call me. But you know what? I never heard from her. Mm-hmm. Never called to check on me, ever. And that broke me even more, because at what point does somebody ask for help because they need it, and then you just don't get it? Mm-hmm. So yeah, that was the first time I asked for help, and I didn't get it. And I say that for people watching right now, because I'm a huge advocate for understanding why you're doing what you're doing. And so it's important, like, when at work, that I'm like, hey, if you're not, connecting with your counselor, like, it's okay to not be with them, and it's okay to say, I want another one. It's like, mm-hmm. I don't ever want somebody to go through that, because, I mean, come on, man, I went another decade without getting help. Yeah. That's a whole 10 years, Aria, of, like, struggling. And really, like, yeah, me, but you know what? They could have helped me for my son. Like, we could have, I could have had more help with being a better mom at that moment. Mm-hmm. And it didn't happen because of judgment and because of that statement to me.
You're saying this to the audience for people who are in addiction and needing help, and they need to advocate for themselves. But also, too, it's really important that we're saying this to the audience of doctors, therapists, peer support, anybody that's on the other side of that patient. They need to know this is somebody coming to you at their lowest point, their most vulnerable point, and they're sharing details of their life that they probably never have told anyone. Mm-hmm. And they're telling you, and you have to act. You mm-hmm. have to be patient. You have to be listening. And yeah, that was probably so painful for you to mm-hmm. experience that. hearing it from you now while you're on the other side of it, like, I'm so glad that you were able to overcome it, but a lot of people don't. And a lot of people walk out that clinic and that's the last person they talk to, and they commit suicide or worse.
That's exactly my point in doing this interview. It's to be vulnerable, but also because my mental health was horrid. I didn't know how to regulate emotions. I was going in and out of toxic relationships. Like, nothing was helping. It's important that people get the help that they need. And so when I'm looking at the people that we work with and I'm able to be on their level, but not just that, but to see them, that is the biggest thing, because they're human. And when I remember that 21-year-old self walking in there and, I wanted help. I was desperate for help at that moment. And I was failed. And it's pretty unfortunate.
Yeah. Just going back to also that person walking out of the office that's suicidal. You've mentioned that you've felt suicidal in the past. And
yeah.
Do you feel like it was amplified by substance use?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I had a lot of depression. I was struggling to understand, why I wasn't, protected. And I was just struggling because there's a part that I didn't understand for a while, which was that victim mentality. And so you have to meet people where they're at. So I didn't understand that I was having a victim mentality, right? But I also didn't understand what happened to me as a child. And so that goes into adulthood, not knowing how to deal with my emotions and all that. And so it does come to a point where if you are drinking, you wonder, am I worth anything? What is the point of life? Is to suffer? When you suffered for so long, like I did, you just start wondering, if my son would be better off without me. And that hurts me to say that right now, right? Because I love my son right now, and it breaks my heart that I was in that stage, that I could even think of that, much less attempt it, because there were multiple attempts. Yeah. And it just breaks my heart that it did intensify it, and it didn't take the pain away. Yeah.
Is that something that you had ever talked with your son about?
Suicide? I think, that's a hard question. I don't think he knew. I don't think he knows. I hid a lot of that stuff from him. But we talk about suicide, yes, because, it's all around us. And he had friends in school, and, my therapist, she had committed suicide, and I was struggling when that happened. And I'm a huge advocate now for suicide. That's why even on one of my tattoos is strength with the butterfly and the semicolon to keep going, because you can be in such a dark place and still come out on top like I did and transform your life, Yeah. But no, I don't think I really told him about all that. I think the important thing is that we did have conversations about, his mom's childhood and struggling. And I think he's so smart that he understood that he got a broken mom. And I did ask for help. It wasn't like I didn't try. But when we don't talk about things as a kid, and then you go to a counselor and then they don't listen to you, you know what that does? It just, you go back into your shell, and then you just stay suffering quietly because you just think that that's your place and that's where you belong, is just to be quiet and to, try to figure it out on your own.
Yeah. I bring up that question because there are so many young people, especially young males, that have suicidal thoughts, and they feel like they lack purpose. And maybe there is substance use, but it's a conversation that needs to be had. If you could talk to yourself in that time when you were suicidal or had an attempt, what would you tell yourself?
There was a quote that I heard one time, and it stuck with me because it hit so hard. And it was, never do a permanent solution for a temporary problem. And that hit me hard. Because it's true. I think the world that we live in, I mean, we're all suffering in some way. And some of us are better at hiding it than others. But the reality is everyone is suffering. And it is an important conversation to have, and them to understand that you are worthy, you are enough, and you are loved. Those are like my main things that I tell people that are suffering. That have come into my office and have said, like, I'm suicidal, I don't have a plan. But as a peer support worker, we do get to be on that end and be able to talk to them about that. And that is something I'm able to help with. I've helped people through that. And it's because they don't see hope, Arya. And that's the problem right now, is a lot of people don't see hope. And so, with me doing this and being vulnerable, it's just so that people look at me and they understand, like, there were a lot of signs that could have been addressed sooner. And, support is everything. And I think that's why I do what I do, because I have to give support to people so that they know that they're not alone. Mm-hmm. I don't care how dark it is, they're not alone. And if I went through hell to walk out with a light, I'm going to go back to hell and I will bring people out, because it's not a place. It's just, I don't want to see anyone else die. Mm-hmm. And whether it's suicide, drugs, or alcohol, everyone is here for a reason. And, my job is to give them that light and to give them that hope, because they laugh at me. My group laughs at me because I tell them, you do realize, I think, and don't quote me on the statistics on this, but I think it said there was like 1 million people on this earth, right? And I tell them, like, each one of us has a fingerprint, right? And your fingerprint is very unique to yourself. And that is huge, because you have a purpose, right? Because there's so many people on this earth, and our job, I think, is to touch as many lives as we can. And I think if they just knew that, right? If they just knew that, just to live one more day and just stay strong and keep going just one more day, how things can change. But in that moment, because I've been in that dark moment, and you're so consumed by the darkness that you do feel like you'd be better off gone. Mm-hmm. You don't think about the funeral. You don't think about what your parents are going to think. You don't think about what your friends are going to think. And in reality, things like that, it affects everybody, because then everybody looks and says, well, I wish I would have known. Maybe there were signs. They start blaming themselves. And I don't think anybody who has committed suicide or who's thinking about it even thinks about the impact it would have. All they're thinking about is they'd be better off gone, and they want to stop the pain that they're feeling. So if anybody's watching and you're suicidal, I do suggest that you talk to somebody. Mm-hmm. And get the help that you need, because you're not alone. There's many, many people that are suffering with that, and I was one of them for a very long time.
I think when people hear the word recovery, they mostly associate it with addiction. Mm-hmm. But what were the first steps that you started taking in your recovery for your mental health and addiction?
I think for me I started with the counseling, right? And that for me, my counselor that I met, she changed my life. Because I had been through counseling before, but like I said, I never really connected. And I kind of just did what the court told me to do. So if they told me I had to be with this person, I was with that person, even if I didn't feel like we were connecting. And she changed everything, because she listened to me. And finally, somebody listened to me. And I'm like, and she heard me and she validated me and she changed my life. She even told me, like, she told me again about PTSD, and I told her, yeah, I've heard that before. I don't really know what that means. And, she gave me a pamphlet and all this stuff on PTSD. And I was very curious to what that meant. So I took it home and I looked over all the stuff, and I was like, oh my gosh, that makes sense. Like, oh, that's me. That's me. Oh, that makes sense. And then it started, like, the puzzle pieces started connecting for me. Like, I was like, oh, I'm not crazy. It's not in your brain. It's not, it's not psychological. Like, people will be like, oh, you're crazy. I wasn't crazy. It was physiological. So when you have PTSD and you're having a trigger, you feel it in your body. And it's that trigger that you're feeling that doesn't feel good. And that's why you want to numb it, But thanks to her telling me that, that's why I feel like I got help, because I didn't really know what that meant. You could tell me all day, but I didn't understand it.
There's multiple attempts at recovery, and we could say the word relapse. But in those attempts at recovery, why do you think it's often so hard, even harder than being in addiction?
Well, there's a few things. So I do run the relapse prevention, and there's a reason I run that, right? I tell them that I run it because I was a queen at relapse, right? And there's a million reasons why we relapse. One, it's because we go back to an old pattern and behavior, okay? And that's okay. Not forever. What I tell them with the relapse is, when you relapse, let's say you've been sober for 5 months and you relapse, and it shows you where your holes are. It shows you kind of like my first question when someone relapses is, who are you with? How are you feeling? So who, what, where, when, and why? Tell me all of it. I need to know all of it. Because I tell my group all the time, relapse is a part of recovery. And the reason it's a part of recovery is because we've gone so long numbing things, and we've gone so long feeling comfortable in that comfortability of knowing how to numb, okay? So if you've been sober for a while, you're now having to learn how to deal with emotions. A lot of us didn't know how to do that. And you're having to deal with all of that sober, and it's not easy, and so relapse is a part of recovery, but I also tell them that it teaches us who we can be around, what areas we should avoid, and it teaches us where our holes are. So I don't love relapse, but I like that it's a learning lesson, and that people can actually use it as a setup, not a setback. And also they relapse because of other people's opinion, right? Because people are like, you're just a drug addict or whatever, or being accused of using when you're not using. I've heard that a few times. Well, if they're going to accuse me of it, I'm just going to do it. And I'm like, yeah, no, let's not do that, right? But they do that because they're hurting their feelings, because you got somebody who's legit trying to get sober, and then here you are accusing them of something that they're not doing. And so then they go back to it, because why not? You're already accusing them of it. So relapse is something that people have to understand. It's going to happen. But my goal in relapse prevention is not to make people feel bad about it. Listen, I'm not sitting here looking at people saying, hey, go relapse, okay? Oh, it's a part of recovery, so that means you can relapse. That's not what I'm saying. And I tell people, if that's what you're taking from this, you're not listening. I want you to learn from your relapse. I'm saying don't stay in shame and guilt, okay? What I found is when you relapse, or you listen to other people who are pulling you down, telling you that you're just a drug addict, or you're just this, you're just that, we're going in a low frequency. And it's okay to dip into a low frequency of like that shame, the guilt for a minute, right? Because it doesn't feel good to, relapse. You're like, oh no, I had 5 months and now I got to start over, as some would put that. But, they don't have to live there. Instead, evaluate it. Let's look at it under a microscope and figure out where you were. Did somebody say something to hurt you? And then look at their limiting belief system and see if that's one of the causes of why they're relapsing.
You said something about relapse often happens because of what other people are saying. So maybe like family member or friends that are saying something to the person in treatment. Maybe they're on methadone, maybe they're on Suboxone, and then those individuals, they come to me as a prescriber, as an example, and they say they want to wean off methadone. Maybe because they're hearing and listening more to what other people are saying, as opposed to the individual that's prescribing the medication and helping guide them, or like yourself. And the same for Suboxone. And I know that you don't need medication to find recovery, but they are super helpful tools. But there is so much stigma around treatment. What do you think is something important that people can take away from this conversation?
We talk about that too. I've heard that a lot in my group, and I also had stigma, from medicated assistant treatment. And I'm going to say this. I did eventually go from, I told you I did a lot of hard drugs, but heroin was one of them. And if I didn't get Suboxone to get off heroin, I wouldn't be here right now. You would not see me sitting here, okay? Because it would have taken my life eventually. And what I want people to know about medicated assistant treatment is, one, they work. And they are just like somebody with diabetes that needs to be treated because it's a medical condition. It's the same thing with addiction. So you can treat it with holistic things like counseling, right? So let's say we have people right now on fentanyl, and that's like 50 to 100 times more potent than even the morphine, right? So if you've never done a withdrawal from an opiate, which I have, right, it's killer. It's one of the worst things that you'll ever go through. And I remember going through withdrawal thinking, now I know why people continue to use. It's not because they want to, it's because they need to, because the withdrawal is so bad that you'll be on the floor crying. They've messed with their central nervous system, essentially, and your whole body is aching. You're going through things, and it's easier to go and do some heroin and stop that. But being from somebody who withdrew from heroin and getting Suboxone, I used the Suboxone to get off of the heroin, and I never went back. I think the stigma of people saying that, oh, you're just trading one drug for another, I disagree. We talk about that a lot because they have to understand it's something that helps them to get their life on track. Listen, if they were trading one drug for another, then tell me why they're getting their families back. Why are they able to hold a job? So people that are on methadone and Suboxone, they're able to get their life back. It's a life-saving medication. It's not trading one drug for another. Even when I was on, even antidepressants, those have a bad rap too. And you know what? I tell people, I had to be on antidepressants. I had to be on anxiety medicine and ADHD medicine during my trauma therapy because I was not able to regulate my emotions. So they were like, we can't even get her to, sit down and have a conversation without crying. And so they medicated me. But I thank God for that every day. You know why? Because I was able to sit through the EMDR. I was able to learn the CBT and the DBT therapy. I was able to do that without being in a trauma state. And so it is very crucial that we stop the stigma of medicated assistant treatment, whether that's anxiety, whether it's, the Suboxone or methadone. It's important that people feel heard and seen. And when you got family members that are telling you, oh, you're still using because you're doing that, it doesn't make them feel good. Mm-hmm. And like you said, I've heard it too, where they're like, I'm just going to stop. I'm just going to stop it altogether. And that's dangerous. It's dangerous to stop something like that because we want to make sure that you're not going through any kind of withdrawal. We want to make sure that you're not having cravings, and it doesn't happen overnight. And people have to understand, give it a chance to work. And if I could do it, if I could do Suboxone, if I could do all of that, and now I'm not on anything, then it should be an inspiration to people and families that have people that are using to say, you know what? she had to do this stuff to get off, but now look at her, right? I'm a law-abiding citizen. I pay my taxes. I don't get in trouble. And it's possible to get your life back when you have the right people behind you to support you, like you as a provider, me on their side for support, and then the medication. Let it do its job. Stop stigmatizing it. It's ridiculous.
A lot of times people are opposed to medications. I often encourage them to give it a chance, and I will still make an effort to send it to their pharmacy, and you can pick it up if you change your mind. But I think a really good takeaway is that you do not have to be on this medication forever. And you said it yourself. I'm not on these medications anymore, but in that time when I needed the help the most, they were so important. And you said something as well, that there was a point where maybe a medication was denied to you.
Yeah. So I went to rehab for 3 months in California, and it was the best rehab I'd ever been to. And I was struggling to be there because it was the first time I ever left my son. But, they kept saying, well, you have to do good for you so you could be better for him. And that helped me to stay as long as I did. But they're the ones, when I went out to rehab, and it was an inpatient rehab for 3 months, they're the ones that did the antidepressants and all of it. And they did put me on an ADHD med. It wasn't nothing crazy, okay? It was like a 5 milligram something or 10 milligram, but it did help. My chaos, it started to calm down a little, right? And so when I'm able to sit in front of a counselor, not crying, able to handle the emotions, that's when those therapies come in really, really well. I left rehab. I was 3 months sober. I came back to Albuquerque, and I went to the doctor, right? And I said, okay, I'm gonna go see the provider, and I'm gonna let them know that these were the medicines that I felt stable on. They were helping me. And I went to the doctor, and I got in with him, and I had my name on him. It's not like I brought drugs from off the street, but I had the medication from the rehab with my name on it, with, they had the little things where you can push, so you just poke a hole for each one.
Yeah.
I don't know what they're called. You know what I mean. Anyway, I brought those in because I had a few left, right? And so I was like, hey, this is what I need. This is what was sustaining my recovery right now, because I wasn't done with 3 months. I still needed EMDR. I still needed to finish my trauma therapy. And he looked at me and he said, I don't feel comfortable giving you this stuff because you just told me you were an addict. And I told him, excuse me? And I'm like, I'm telling you that this is the stuff that they gave me in rehab that has helped me to progress, to talk about my trauma, and to be able to move forward. He denied that. He wouldn't give it to me. And I think he gave me 1 out of the 3 that I needed, or maybe the 4, and that wasn't enough. And so, again, here we go with me being shut up and not listened to, and then I ended up using after that. It's a rough cycle. And so it's good to have places like Duke City and like providers like you that listen, and are willing to try to help in any way. Because I didn't go in there like drug seeking. I wasn't looking for, Adderall or anything like that. They didn't give me anything like that. They had given me like just something that helped me to focus and to get my life on track. And, when we're denying that to people, we're ignoring where they're at, and all they hear is addict. It's pretty heartbreaking, honestly, because you're the reason that they're still using. If you're not willing to listen, if you're not willing to try something new to get them back where they need to be.
I know you kind of said before you went to rehab, mentioning about your son, and that was the motivation for you to stay in treatment. But you did say too that a point in your life he was taken away.
That was after. So I had went to rehab in California, and like I said, I had come back, and it was another relapse. I had got arrested for another DWI, and he was, he was in the vehicle is what it was. And they had come to see me in jail, and they were like, hey, it was CYFD, and they had said, do you have a problem? I said, yeah, obviously I have a problem, right? I already knew I had a problem. I didn't know how many times I had to say that. But when you come and go to the doctor, try to get the stuff that you need, you don't get it, you don't feel heard. I resorted back to an old pattern, because that's what was familiar to me. And they came to see me in jail, and they let me know that my grandparents were willing to keep my son until he turned 18, because they didn't understand what I was going through. He was, I think, what grade? I want to say 8th grade or something, maybe 9th grade. But they wanted to keep him till he was 18. And I was like, absolutely not. Like, I am not a bad parent. I'm somebody who's struggling, but I'm not a bad parent. And I got out, and CYFD was like, you can't have any contact with him. Mind you, this is like the first time, like, I'd never been able to talk to him or anything like that. There were like no contact, all of these things. And that was the hardest thing for me, because now you got me going down a rabbit hole of another mental health issues over here, because now I've lost the one thing that was my life at the time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it sounds like that was a rock bottom place.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it was. Mm-hmm. Because I had been trying to get help, and, at some point you got to kind of look in the mirror and realize that it was my actions that led to that. So yeah, I think definitely was rock bottom when my son, the CYFD took him. Like, they were like, you can't have no contact with him. I was completely devastated. I was heartbroken. I knew that I had an issue and I had a problem that I needed to address, but I definitely knew that my love for him, nobody was going to love him the way I was. Nobody was going to, treat him the way that I was going to treat him, because he was always my rock and my that person that I needed to be better for. Mm-hmm. He was my inspiration.
At what point did things start going in a good direction for you with your progress in recovery?
It was definitely when my son was taken, and I had a PTSD trigger at the downtown. I went in there to UA, and it was actually a CO from the jail who did my UA, and she did it very not like everyone else did when you're on pretrial. And I didn't realize that it was a trigger. I started shaking, and, it was the way that she observed it and the way that she conducted the UA was pretty inappropriate. I didn't know what I was going through. I could just tell you I started shaking. My body was shaking. I was very nervous. I still did it because I was pretty reserved at first. I was like, I'm not doing that. Like, nobody's ever made me do that before. She still made me drop my pants all the way to the ankle and made me very uncomfortable. I went to IOP that day. And I remember I was crying. I didn't even want to get out of the car, but it was court ordered that I do it. And I wanted my son back more than anything. So it didn't matter how I was feeling. I went in, and at that moment, Jay was conducting our IOP. And I was kind of like a little kid trying to hide with my paper up. I didn't want to be seen because I was crying. It's kind of something you can't control. And she stopped the IOP and was like, hey, why don't we take a break? And she asked me if I wanted to go have a cigarette with her outside. And I did. And she's like, we don't have to talk if you don't want to. And I just looked at her and I said, I don't. Because at that moment, I didn't even know what to say. And she then told me, she's like, I know you're going through a hard time. I don't really know what's going on. But like I said, I'm here if you want to talk. And at that moment, no way. I finished my cigarette. When I was finished, I was calmed down enough And I looked at her and I said, how do I explain to you what I don't even understand? And she said, let's go to my office. She wasn't even my counselor at the time. It was actually somebody else. And I went in there with her, and it took me a really long time to express what just happened, because, again, I didn't know how to put into words what I was dealing with. And I tried my best, and she understood what I said. And she said that, yeah, you're dealing with some PTSD triggers right now. I said, yeah, but I don't understand it, right? I don't know what that means for my life. So she talked to me about it. And then I told her about my son being taken away. And I remember her asking me in that session, she said, well, CYFD took him? And I said, yeah. And she said, well, what did they say when you went to court? And I told her I never went to court. And she said, you haven't seen your son in 3 months and they never took you to court? And I said, no. They saw me in the jail, told me that I couldn't see him, and that was it. He's been with my grandparents ever since. And she said, that's a violation of your rights. And she called and made a phone call. And she made a phone call not only to CYFD, but she made a phone call to my pretrial services. And at that moment, I realized that she was somebody that I could talk to and somebody that I could trust that wasn't just there for a paycheck. And she, at that moment, ended up, I think it was like the next day, I told her, I was like, good luck getting a hold of CYFD, because it's hard to get a hold of them, even when, And the next day I got a call from CYFD, and I'll never forget that phone call. She called and she said, Miss Gonzales, we're dropping your case. You can go pick up your son. And I just dropped the phone crying, and I told the person I was saying, let's go get my son. And I was so happy because she heard me, but she also knew that my rights were violated. And so I was willing to open everything to her, all of it. And I started all over. I gave her everything. I told her everything. And that's when my healing started, is when she not only got my son back, but, pretrial services called, and they were like, we're so sorry that happened to you. We're going to actually start giving you once a month testing. Because it was a violation of my rights and I wasn't aware. But the fact that I had somebody on my side that was supportive is why it made all the difference in the world.
Mm-hmm. That is a really powerful story.
She was amazing, honey. I was heartbroken this whole time. And then when you took my son away, he was my everything. And even through addiction, I still would, go to work and make sure he had what he needed. I always put me on the back burner, but I never wanted him to feel abandoned. And that was something that I was very worried about if I didn't get him back.
Recovery requires a total different mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And so my question is, what was the mental shift that you had to do to finally have it stick?
Well, I think, like I told you, my rock bottom. And for me to the not using the alcohol took me longer than anything, because the other stuff I did the detox for the other stuff, and I quit right away. It was the alcohol that took longer. But the mental shift, it came with acknowledging the consequences of my actions and understanding that if I wanted to be a better role model for my son, then I had to do better. I had to look in the mirror, and I had to take accountability for my choices and my actions. And even though I was struggling with PTSD at the moment, and even though I was struggling with all that, it was not okay to be so selfish that I was, putting my son at jeopardy. So for me, it was remembering consequences. And that's why I quit, is because I was sick and tired of, looking at myself in the mirror, because I couldn't even do it. I was so ashamed of this person, and how did I get here? And why? What what happened to me? So the mental shift definitely came when I lost my son, and understanding that I had to hold myself accountable and stop blaming everyone else. And there was a few different shifts that had to happen, but to stop that was that right there. Mm-hmm. It was the accountability.
And you said something important. I believe that recovery is freedom from bondage. Mm-hmm. What belief about yourself did you have to unlearn to be able to experience that?
So believe it or not, I've been sober for a long time now, and we teach people, right, where we work, we teach them how to get sober, and then I teach them how to live sober in my group. But the one thing that I just learned last year is my identity. And that's the one thing I was missing. I think we get sober, okay, we get that part out of the way. Then I help them to stay sober and figure out why they're relapsing and things like that. But I was missing something still. And I hired a coach, so shout out to Saint Fit, because they have changed my life in the last year. And even though I wasn't using, there was something missing, okay? And what was missing was my identity. And my coach, he's a life coach, and he does mind, body, and spirit. And I was still struggling. I was struggling with people's opinions. I cared too much. I was a people pleaser. There was a lot still going on that was not healed, even without the drug and alcohol use, okay? I was still lost. I was still what is going on with me? But I hired this coach, and he was doing something that nobody else did. He's doing mind, body, and spirit. So we do, he works on the God aspect and realigning every morning. We work on our body, and we work on our mindset. And I'll never forget him asking me to do my identity statement. And I'd never done that, right? I've never really, I told you before, I had a hard time looking in the mirror at times. So he asked me to do my identity statement to talk about me, right? And never done that before. So I did. And I remember I gave it to him, and he's like, that's good, but you kind of missed the mark there, And I was like, what do you mean? And it was all trauma-based, right? It was talking about the PTSD and all of it. And he's like, yeah, you kind of missed it. I want to know who Antinet is, without the trauma, right? Never thought about that before. Because at some point, that trauma had become my identity. And that is so scary to think of right now, because I didn't know that. And so then we did it again. And then my second one, he's like, oh, you kind of missed it again. I'm like, how did I miss it there? Because I was talking about being a mom, right? And he was like, honey, I want to know who you are without the trauma and without being a mom. And I'm not going to lie, I was kind of upset, because I was like, I am nothing without being a mom, right? That is who I am. That's what I live for. And I remember him and Coach V saying something along the lines of no, when your kids grow up and they leave the house, who are you? Who are you? And I struggled with that, Aria. I struggled with knowing who I was. And I remember them asking me, how about this? Why don't you tell us who God says you are? And I was like, I could do that, right? Because I know who God says I am. Now, did I believe that? Absolutely not. But I could tell you who he says I am, okay? And so that started the identity statement. So I did the whole thing, and I'm all happy with that, okay? But did I believe it? Absolutely not. And we went down this whole journey with Saint Fit last year, and it was aligning every morning, and it was working on my identity. And what I found was my missing piece. I found that you can have sobriety and still not know who you are. You can be, have the tools in your toolbox and still be suffering. I was still suffering in bondage. Why? Because I didn't realize that PTSD diagnosis and that trauma was still holding on to me. So doing my Saint Fit journey with them, I definitely can say that 2026 is going to be my best year. 2025 was a year of discovery. And you do have a mindset shift, because you have to, one, acknowledge that you have a problem, and you have to look at that and be accountable for that. But then you have to figure out who you are. You got to find your identity without the kids, without the trauma. And looking back this last year, being able to shed that, being able to be like, transform from that to this, is exactly what I was saying the recovery community needs. Because again, we can get them sober. Then you can bring them to me for the aftercare, right? And help them with that support. But they're still missing something, and they're missing their identity. Because if we don't understand who we are and our strengths and all of that without kids, without the trauma, then who are we? Mm-hmm. So to be honest with you, my identity has shifted, and I am free of bondage. And even though you could say that I was free from bondage because I stopped using, but I wasn't, because I was still suffering with being held underwater, it felt like, right? And still drowning and not understanding why. And that's why I think it's important that we invest in ourselves and we figure out who we are and what we stand for. Because that person that God said I was in that identity statement is the girl and woman that you were looking at right now. And that is such a beautiful, beautiful thing, is to know who you are. And so when I have people say, anything, I don't care what it is, it doesn't matter what they say. You want to know why? Because I'm rooted in a foundation of truth on who I am and where I've been. And I did find my identity through my trauma, but that's not who I am.
I've never had anybody ask me that either. But in a sentence, could you give us an example of what that identity statement is, your identity statement?
Yeah. If you would have asked me, over a year ago, I wish I had it with me so I could read you my original one, because you can actually see the shift. But my identity right now is that my words matter. When I speak, I'm heard. I am loved. I am enough. I matter. I am a warrior. I am chosen. I am a fighter. I look at myself as somebody who not only survived all the stuff that I did and that I went through, but that doesn't define me. So I'm definitely thriving, and I'm very successful. And, success is not measured by the things that we have. It's measured by freedom and where we are mentally. And I am completely free. And I feel great. And the sky is the limit at this moment, because I believe everything that God said about me. So at this moment, I'm healthy, I'm wealthy, I'm fit, I am a savage saint, I'm a queen, and I'm finding everything that makes me unique about me, and I'm loving my life right now. Yeah.
That makes me so motivated, just to hear you say that.
Yeah.
You are amazing.
Thank you. He's amazing. I mean, I think nobody thinks of that. And I even told my coach, I was like, we need a Saint Fit in Albuquerque. Like, if I'm going to run it, I'll run it. But I'm being honest when I say that was the missing piece, you know, because I had everything else. I had the sobriety, I had the time, and what was I missing was my identity. And anybody who's struggling with, you know, drugs or addiction or, you know, mental health issues too, because it's all of it, has to understand that we don't make that your identity. You know, my coach said to me, he's like, stop saying that you have PTSD. And I told him, well, what am I supposed to say? Like, I work with these people. And so then I changed the wording. And honestly, Aria, it changed everything. It really did. So instead of saying I have, right, I say I was diagnosed with PTSD, because it's not giving it any power over me anymore. And it changed my life. To not be declaring that over my life changed everything. And so now I tell people I was diagnosed with it. But what's fascinating is that it doesn't have its claws in me. And I'm able to recognize and be aware of it without it affecting me. Yeah. And that's amazing.
So you might not have realized this, but you said that when you had the diagnosis, that you were looking in that brochure and pointing out, like, that is me, this is me, that's exactly what's happening to me. And it helped you to realize what was occurring in your life. And I feel like a lot of people, when they get that diagnosis, it helps them to have answers.
Yeah, we don't feel crazy.
But then, on the other hand, you say something that's so important to realize, that that's not what defines you. And yes, it's important to know, but who are you outside of that? And
that's what's going to change people's lives, is the ability to, like I said, I went through stages, right? So there had to have been like the counseling and then the EMDR and all of that to figure out why I was doing the things that I was doing. But now it's just better because I'm able to recognize it and I'm aware of it. And self-awareness is something that I teach in group, because self-awareness is something that everybody needs to be aware of. Like, what are your triggers? Like, even if it's not like drug or alcohol related, this is mental health too. Like, what is triggering your depression? What is triggering you to feel that way? And I say it to everyone, and, you know, I say, everyone in your life that we are allowing in our life is either bringing us up or pulling us down. And so it's up to us to be aware of that and to make that choice on who we want around. Even with family. If they're trying to bring me back to a past, like somebody I was, 20 years ago, or bringing up something like that, I'm not that person anymore. And so if you're going to bring it up, I'm not going to have you around. I have to be around people that are progressing. I have to be around people that are in a higher frequency than me, because if I dip into a low frequency area, I need somebody to pick me up. And that's what I do for our patients, is they'll come in and they'll be in a very low state. And I'm like, it's okay to be there, but it's not okay to stay there, right? And that's why we're having, people come back to my group that are not court ordered. They're showing up because they're getting something from it. And I am an inspiration to them. And that's why it's important that people understand, self-investment and self-awareness are key to recovery.
I was listening to a podcast recently, and they were interviewing Tony Robbins, and he's an amazing motivational speaker. He said that there's so much focus on us to take care of ourselves, self-care, me, but that doesn't give us the feeling of purpose. What gives us the feeling of purpose is going outside of that and extending our hand to other people, and being in a community of people, giving to others. And I think what you say is your identity is this as well. And you being a peer support worker how do you feel that the pain that you've gone through has now turned into this service that you do in your life?
Yeah, I love that you said that. I definitely, I think that in recovery, I just want to be clear, I think you need to be selfish, right? I think when you're getting into recovery, we need to be selfish. We need to be selfish with who we're hanging out with and all of that. I tell them, be selfish for you. But once you're done with that, right? Once we're done and got you in recovery, you have a few years and you're ready to move on to like your purpose, it's important to serve other people. And so for me, my guiding grace is aligning every morning and understanding that I don't do this stuff for me. I didn't come on this podcast to talk about, just me. This was to empower people that are suffering. And that's my purpose. My purpose is to serve the community. My purpose is to help people to get out of the dark place that they're in and to understand that, you are who God says you are. You're not who the world says you are. Even if you're in the darkest moments of your life, you can still find beauty out of it. And that's hard for people when they're in the midst of their struggle. And I understand that. And that's why it's important, it's crucial to have a group around you of support that is going to lift you when you're in a dark place. Mm-hmm. So for me, being a peer support worker, it is my purpose. It is my purpose to give empathy and sympathy and to give my all, even I give everything, but I also fill my own cup. And that's another thing St. Fit taught me is like you give, but what are you giving to yourself? So thankful for them like that I'm able to take a step back. I'm able to cut people off when I need to, turn my phone on Do Not Disturb. I am able to say no, because no is a whole sentence. I've learned that. And I've learned to stop people pleasing. And it's changed everything. So to be able to get all that self-care stuff and learn, I'm able to give that to other people and I'm able to serve them better. And that's all I want to do, Aria, is I just want to make people feel better. I want to bring them out of their darkness, and give them light. I want to help them break chains. I want to help them break old patterns. And the most important thing for me is to help them figure out what their limited beliefs are about themselves. Because that's what I struggle with. I had all these beliefs about myself, and I remember getting upset and Coach telling me, he's like, Antoinette, he's like, you went your whole life believing all this stuff about yourself, right? And you think it's just going to change overnight? Give yourself some grace. And I remember that it hit so hard because he was right. Like, I had all these limiting beliefs that I wasn't worth it, that... all of them, they were horrible. I had some really bad ones. And to understand that it was going to take time for my mindset to shift. It took about probably that year. It took all last year. But now you're looking at somebody who is healed and somebody who forgives, right? I forgive the people who hurt me. And that's hard to say, especially because of the stuff I've been through and being exploited and all the things that I've been through. But I forgive, and my purpose is to help people to move past their darkness and find the light.
Now, in your work, sitting across from somebody that you're talking to and trying to support, what do you see in them that reminds you of the person that you used to be?
I see a lot of hesitation. I see a lot of people... They don't believe me when we talk about what we're feeding ourselves. We talk a lot about the art of positive thinking, and a lot of them look at me funny, and I laugh because I'm like, I know what you're thinking because I thought the same thing, right? Especially because they think they're just mindless, worthless, affirmations, right? And I remember being that person, not believing I'll put "you are beautiful," and I wasn't going to believe that because I wasn't going to believe it. And when my therapist told me to do that, I was having a meltdown one day. She told me to write all those affirmations down, and I wrote them. And I remember I was having a bad day, and I smacked the visor in the car, and a little sticky note fell on my lap, and it said, "You're enough." And I remember smiling. And so it has meaning, right? And so it's important that people understand, like, what we feed ourselves and what we're telling ourselves, it matters. And for me, I was a very negative thinker, and I see that so much with them. I see them beating themselves up, not feeling worthy, like nobody cares about them. Or, they have a relapse and they just feel the worst, like they're in shame and guilt. Some of them won't even look at me. And I'm like, look at me. It's okay. It's okay. I'm not mad. I have no reason to be mad. Mm-hmm. This is a learning experience. This is your journey. Everybody's journey is different. I think they have to give themselves grace for that. But I also tell them, you guys have to be accountable too. They'll come into group and I tell them, like, some of you are lying. Like, don't be saying like you didn't relapse when I know, that you did. And it's not because I want them to be honest with me. I want them to be honest with themselves. I want them to be able to look in the mirror and be like, I made a mistake, but that doesn't define me, right? I need them to have a turnaround a little bit quicker, because what I'm seeing is, that reminds me of me, is the shame, the guilt, that depression, and that they just hold it. And it's like such a horrible thing to do. And they'll sit there and they'll sulk in that. And I tell them, it's okay to dip, right? So if you have a relapse, it's not going to feel good. But that's why you come see me, so we can pull you out of that, because what's going to happen is, if you stay like that, you're going to end up depressed, and you're going to probably use again, because you're starting to have those limited beliefs, like, maybe that is who I am. Maybe that's all I'm on this earth to do, is to just be worthless or useless or whatever they believe about themselves. And I think for me, that's the one thing that I see that I had. And I think that's what relates to them the most, is understanding that I had all of it. I had the negative belief system. I had the anger. I had the inability to regulate emotions. And I had the drug use. And most of them will look at me and be like, you don't look like you were using. And I'm like, that's the face of recovery. That's what that looks like. And that's what you guys can have too. I have the scars to prove it, but I don't need that anymore. I need them to see who I am now and understand that it is possible, and it is sustainable. Mm-hmm. And you can build back friendships. You can build back relationships with your family. Things that were broken can be mended.
Sometimes I do a little lesson of, like, how the highest high you experience from using is because the chemicals in your brain are releasing and it feels good. It's an artificial feeling that you can't often replicate in real life. But what I've tried to encourage people is, now is a time that you have to do the things that give you that feeling of being high on life. Mm-hmm. And whether that means the exercise, whether that means learning a new craft, learning a new skill, giving to others, volunteering, working, building a friendship, building relationships with our family, with our children, it all gives us small joy in life. Mm-hmm. And now that you've come to this place in your life, what are those moments that give you the high in life?
It's being present in my own life. I'm living a life that I'm not escaping anymore. And the thing that I want people to understand is, we don't get to say how much time we have. And so time is so precious, but yet we act like we have so much of it. And what I get right now is the ability to be present for my daughter. I have a 6-year-old. She's absolutely amazing. My son is 21. And they're both doing so amazing. And they get the best version of me. And so I'm loving my life as far as being able to be the best mom that I could be, and a healed version of me. And I get to enjoy all the little moments. I get to go to my daughter's school and, do her gingerbread houses. I get to go to my son's work and look at this man who I raised, and he's doing great things. He's so caring, so respectful. And, even though I struggled he knew that I loved him. And I'm able to live a life that I'm not running from. And it is so meaningful to not only me, but my children. And, you know, my grandpa passed away 6 years ago, and he got to see me sober. And that was amazing. And I'll never forget, you know, him and I talking before he passed, and him asking me, you know, he didn't understand the drug use and all of it. So he had asked me about it, and we actually finally got to talk. Remember, I told you we didn't really talk that much. And I told him, I said, I was suffering inside, and I got to be open and honest with him and have that moment in sobriety, in clarity and vision, and be able to express myself clearly. And he heard me before he died, and he apologized for not listening and not being there. And I'm like, it wasn't your fault. You know, you guys did the best that you could with what you guys learned when you were, you know, growing up. And so I can't be upset. But it was the moments that I get to spend with my family now. And those are the joys that I live for. And being able to be present for everything. Even when he passed away, I was present. I was in that whole grief and all of it, but I did it sober. And it helps when you're sober, when you go through grief, because you don't suffer as long. And living in gratitude is huge. I have to live in gratitude. But I live a life of gratitude and purpose now. And I don't live to impress anyone else. I don't work for applause. I work for a cause. And I'm very present. And I think I'm understanding that time is valuable. And we don't have much time. You know, 100 years from now, we're not going to be here. So what we do today, it matters. The people that come into our life, Arya, those are the people that it's our responsibility to help them, listen to them, whatever we can to make their life better. But it's also up to them to be accountable, and it's also up to them to be open. You know, I see a lot of people that they're not open. They're not open to anything because they got so many walls, and I don't blame them because I had all those walls too, because life will knock you down and it'll hurt you, but you have to just keep going. And when they find out that life is actually funner when you're sober, you know, going to the Balloon Fiesta sober, going to a concert sober, it's more meaningful. You know, you live a life full of meaning. And, you know, I think that's where I'm at. I definitely think being present and understanding that time goes so quick, and enjoying every moment of that and making sure that my kids see the best version of me is where I'm at.
For a second, I almost forgot that I'm interviewing you because I'm so in your story and just listening to what you have to say. And it has so much weight and it's powerful.
Thank you.
And I know that the person sitting there on the other side of this, you know, podcast, who is at that point where they just can't see a way out of it, like, what would you say as that reason to keep going? That one thing that could help them, what would you want them to hear?
That you are not a product of your mistakes. That you are loved, you are cared about, and you matter. God loves you. You know, God has a lot to do with my faith, and He's the reason I'm still here. He's the reason you guys, if you're listening to this, it's because you're here for a reason. And if you don't have anybody in your life that is supporting you or that understands you, because I didn't have people that understood me, come find me. Antoinette Gonzales, work for Duke City. That's my purpose, is to give that support and help people. So if you are going through a dark spot and you feel like there's no way out, I want you to come see me. I want you to come see Arya. I want you to come see Duke City. I want you to feel the love and support that is needed. And, you know, like I said, I wouldn't be caught up so much on what you guys are doing and like the drugs and the alcohol, or even the relationships that are broken. Because when you find yourself, I want you to be selfish. Make it about you. Make your recovery about you and not about your parents, not about your kids. Make it about you. And then when you do that, you'll find that those things, they come back and they mend themselves. You know, the best apology is not words. It's not, I'm sorry. You know how many times our family's sick of hearing, I'm sorry? The best apology is your action. They don't want to hear, I'm sorry anymore. And they don't have to. You can make a choice and change your life. So I invite anybody to come see us for recovery. I invite you to recovery, and I invite you to rewrite your story, because this isn't the end. And I think that's the most important thing for people to understand, that this isn't the end. This isn't you. And just because you've used, and just because people have done bad things to you or said mean things to you, or you feel like you're probably this big, you're not that big. And you have so much potential, so much worth. And if I could help them to get rid of their limiting beliefs, I'm telling you, like, the sky's the limit. And they can do anything that they put their mind to. I remember my grandparents saying that to me. You know, they're like, life is what you make it. And for a long time, I didn't understand that. I couldn't comprehend that statement, that life is what you make it. I couldn't comprehend it. Now I look and I'm like, oh, I get it now. It is what you make it. It's the choices that we make. And, you know, I choose to make good choices every day. I choose to walk with integrity. I choose to walk with confidence. I choose recovery. I choose faith over fear, you know. And anyone suffering, I just want them to come see me. That's what I do. I help people break chains. I help them find, you know, new habits. I give light in the darkness, and there's nothing that they can say that would shock me. I've heard it all. I've seen it all. I've probably done it. And you know, you're not your mistakes. And I want people to understand that. And I want them to get the help that they need, because if they're watching this, it's because there's a part of them that needs it. And I just want to be a part of the recovery, so I invite them to come to recovery and see what that feels like. Yeah.
I can't think of a better way to end this conversation. And you're right. The person who is out there that has clicked that video, clicked that audio, mm-hmm. It's because there's something inside of them that is wanting to be awake and clear to this message, mm-hmm. and they want recovery for themselves. So please join us whenever you can.
Come find recovery. We got you.
I just want to say thank you again for being here with me today. And
thank you for inviting me.
You're an amazing, powerful woman.
Thank you. I appreciate you. So are you. So are you.
Please help me on this journey to help change the trajectory of our story. We are Project Basecamp, and we are climbing to recovery.